Hello, Aussie Dollar Man here, and welcome to part 2 of this series on W.D. Gann's gold. In this video, we're going to tackle the concept of wheels within wheels, which Gann mentions in his book, The Tunnel Through the Air, and actually originates from the Bible in the book of Ezekiel. If you're new to the channel, welcome. This channel is dedicated to the works and teachings of the great W.D. Gann and aims to help those who are on the Gann pathway to move forward wherever they are on their journey. And if you're interested in learning more, I have put together a few videos in a playlist at the top of the channel. And if you do find value in this or any of my videos, I'd really appreciate it if you could just click on the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. In part 1 of this series, and it was originally just going to be a standalone video, but in part 1 called W.D. Gann's Gold and Where to Find It, I went through my collection of Gann books and courses and showed you where I think students should start out initially to target the gold that is going to make you money. So this series continues in that vein. This is not a series that's going to teach you all of Gann's secrets in just a few short videos. It doesn't work like that. Gann is a multi-year study. Even if you have a mentor walking you through who knows everything, and to my knowledge, that person doesn't exist, but if you had a person like that, it would still take you years to go all the way through all the information on the Gann journey. The goal of these videos is to get you profitable as quickly as possible by showing you Gann's gold, so that if you choose, you can pursue higher knowledge of Gann systems. Now, I have 20 of these books and courses on my shelf. As I mentioned in part 1, there are only 3 that I think that you need when you're starting out. Until you get profitable, there's no point dumping $15,000, $20,000 on all these books and courses to get them all. You're better off just targeting those 3 books that I mentioned in part 1. The first of those is this one here, the Wall Street Stock Selector. These days, it is sold in a bundle with Gann's first book, The Truth of the Stock Tape. We're going to be looking at a single page of the Wall Street Stock Selector in just a moment, but if you do buy the bundle and you've got both books there, I'd encourage you, if you're new to Gann, read the first 30 or 40 pages of Truth of the Stock Tape. It will just give you a bit of an idea of who Gann was and his philosophy, and a good general overview of how markets work, why some traders are successful, and why other traders beat themselves. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the concept of wheels within wheels, which, as I said earlier, Gann quotes in his book, The Tunnel Through the Air, as he is referencing the book of Ezekiel in the Bible. We'll take a look at this concept of wheels within wheels, and then I'll show you how I set that up on charts using a trading platform called TradingView. Now, if you wanted to buy a copy of Gann's book, The Wall Street Stock Selector, you can find it on wdgann.com. I don't get anything for recommending this. I'm just making it easy for you. $39 for a digital download of both of those books. You can actually find it for free on archive.org. You can find the ebooks there of Truth of the Stock Tape and Wall Street Stock Selector. Personally, I like to have the hard copy books in my hand. That's why I've got 20 of them, the various books and courses on my bookshelf, but to each their own. Okay, so let's talk about wheels within wheels. Now, this concept, or this phrase, wheel within a wheel, comes from Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 4 to 16, and Gann references it more than once, by the way, in his novel, The Tunnel Through the Air. Now, interestingly, that's mentioned on page 52, page 78, page 108, and page 224. And the word wheel, including wheels, so if you've got the word wheels there, obviously wheel is included there. But if you do a keyword search for wheel in The Tunnel Through the Air, it comes up 26 times. Now, that may mean something to some of you. It may not mean anything to any of you. But if you take a look at the page numbers that wheels within a wheel appears in The Tunnel Through the Air, page 52, that is one off, 2 times 26 or 52. And then the next time that it's mentioned is on page 78, which is 27 pages later, which is 1 off 26, or 78 is 3 times 26. So there may be a clue there with that number 26 or with multiples of that number to give you an idea of what Gann is talking to you about or hinting at there. So here's the quote. I've taken a screenshot of page 51 of The Tunnel Through the Air. Gann is quoting Ezekiel 1 verses 4 to 16. He starts that on page 50, but the wheel within a wheel, or wheel in the middle of a wheel, as it says here, begins on page 51. So I'll read the whole quote out. Now, as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the colour of a beryl, and they 4 had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was, as it were, a wheel in the middle of a wheel. Robert felt sure that this was the prediction and description of an airplane that Ezekiel was talking about. He thought that an airplane could be built with 4 wings, which would be more powerful and useful than any of the airplanes yet built. It was his great desire to build an airplane of this kind. Now, in The Tunnel Through the Air, the airplanes represent cycles, and you have to decode them and figure out what they are, how to use them, where to use them, etc. But the concept that we're looking at here, a wheel in the middle of a wheel, picture a small wheel and then a larger wheel and then an even larger wheel. And you're starting to get an idea of how these things work. And the smaller wheel will turn first, and then it will turn the medium-sized wheel, and it will turn the larger wheel. And that's the very, very beginnings of this concept. We'll look at it in terms of market charts in just a moment. Now, as I said earlier, this concept is mentioned again on page 78 of The Tunnel Through the Air, and it's right at the bottom. This is where Gann, or Robert Gordon, is talking about how do I forecast future cycles. Now, I'd encourage you to read this chapter more than once, and of course to read Tunnel Through the Air more than once, but at the bottom there, Gann tells you in every law of nature, there is a major and a minor, a positive, a negative, and a neutral. Therefore, in cycles, there must be a lesser, a greater, and intermediate cycle, or cycles within cycles. Like Ezekiel says, wheel within a wheel. Now, if you've done some work on Gann's planetary systems, you'll know that each market at the planetary level is going to have 3 cycles. There's an intermediate cycle that gives you around 4 to 6 turns each month in your market. It basically syncs up with your 1 and 2 day swing charts. Then there's a greater cycle, which gives you somewhere between 1 and 3 turns most months. And that often, but not always, will sync up with your weekly chart. And then there's a very small cycle, which will give you anywhere from about 8 to 12 turns per month. Now, I like to use the largest and the medium cycle there. The smaller cycle can be really useful for pinpointing your initial entry and then for your compounding entries later. But in terms of trading when the cycles are pointing the same direction, I tend to focus on the medium cycle backed up by the larger cycle there. But Gann's telling you to use them as a wheel within a wheel. Now, if you're not familiar with it, this is coming from Gann's novel, The Tunnel Through the Air. However, it's not for the beginner. The beginner should read it and begin to absorb it, listen to the story, look for the repetitive points in there, look at what Gann is pointing you towards, familiarize yourself with the text, but you're going to have to come back to it and back to it and back to it over time. You're not just going to sit down, read it, and know how to trade. Yes, Gann put his secrets in there. However, it is coded, it is hidden, it's hard work. So just keep that in mind. Yes, it's important, but you build up to it. You don't start at that. If you want to get to work on it, I have put an audiobook together of The Tunnel Through the Air. You can find that playlist on this channel. So let's get back to this concept of wheels within wheels. In time, if you persist, you're going to start applying multiple time cycles to your markets. And that's what wheels within wheels really is all about. But again, that's in time and only if you persist. It's not going to be handed to you. It's something that you're going to have to work for. It's going to be a mixture of your own hard work and potentially getting a bit of guidance from other people as well. However, you should start to think in terms of wheels within wheels right from the start, because it's going to help you to understand how markets work. And in my opinion, it's also the best way to get you profitable in the market as well. And that brings us to this single page from the Wall Street Stock Selector. It's just this one page that I want you to focus on. But you can see here, and I know the quality is not all that great. You've got to remember this was printed around 1930s, almost 100 years ago. But you can see over here, Gann has 4 market charts side by side. He's got the yearly, and then the monthly, and then the weekly, and then the daily. This is a really big key to get you profitable in trading. So I'd encourage you to give this a bit of thought. Think of these as small wheels, and as you move up in your time frames, think of them as larger and larger and larger wheels. And as you move down through the time frame, so daily down to say a 4-hour chart, down to a 1-hour chart, a 15-minute chart, a 5-minute chart, think of those as your smaller wheels. When a market makes a major top or a major bottom in the market, it's the very small wheels that turn first. Gann tells us that the smallest cycle is the 4-minute cycle. So that very, very small cycle will turn first, and it will give you an indication that the trend has changed in the market. You'll usually see a strong impulse move on that small chart there. So you'll see a potential low there. You'll see a small move there on, say, the 4-minute chart. That will then be backed up by the 15-minute and the hourly chart and the 4-hour chart over time. It takes time for the bigger and bigger charts to unfold and give you that move. So if you're watching a series of charts like this as wheels within wheels, look for those moves. When you think that the market is near a turn, you look for signs of the turn on those smaller picture charts, and then you look for confirmation on those bigger time frames as you go. And I'll tell you now, if you want to make a high reward to risk ratio on your trades, what you need to do, and you might want to write this down, what you need to do is trade a big picture turn like a yearly or a monthly or a weekly and enter it using a small picture time frame like a 1-hour chart or a 15-minute chart or a 4-minute chart. Now, that's not always possible, But when you can do that, that's when you get the big reward to risk ratios on your trades. I traded a move of about 300 points on the Australian dollar a couple of years ago. And it only unfolded over 2 weeks. And you look at it and you think it's a nothing sort of a move. But I made a 56-to-1 return out of that because I got a really, really tight entry. And if you can get a really tight entry, only risking, say, 5 or 10 ticks on a trade, the market only has to move a few hundred points and you've got a very, very high reward to risk ratio there. And this is how you do it. You set it up on these charts here. What most people do is they overload their charts with indicators. But before you start doing that, get a feel for the rhythm of the market. And there was an instructor at a company called Safety in the Market where I was a student many years ago and a teacher for a period of time as well. The instructor was Noel Campbell, and he gave some really fantastic advice. I was young and hot-headed at the time. I don't think I took that advice, but if I was slightly older and slightly less hot-headed and starting from the beginning, I would take this advice now. He said to watch a market for a period of time without necessarily having the intention of trading that market. We sort of look at markets and we look at one chart and we try and work out, is it going up or down? When do I jump in and load up on a trade? But watch the market and just watch how it moves, watch how it unfolds, and do it, as I'm going to show you how to set this up in TradingView, but do it on multiple timeframes and watch how the smaller charts will turn first. Watch how they turn, watch how they look, watch how the next chart up moves, watch how the next chart up moves. Now, this sort of analysis, by the way, we do every Sunday night in the Forex Form Guide on this channel. That's 7 p.m. Sydney time, where we take a look at the major Forex pairs through the lens of WD Gann analysis. You can find previous episodes on the channel, but it goes live most Sundays, barring any illness or other event. So let's get in now to setting up charts. What most people will do, they'll open a chart like this. This is the SPY 200 Index Futures, which is the futures contract over our ASX 200 index. Most people will start out, they'll pick a technique, they'll put it on the chart, and they'll try and work out what's going on based on one technique on one time frame. Then, when they're not getting the results that they want, they'll start adding technique after technique after technique until their chart looks something like this. Now, believe it or not, this is actually fairly light compared to what people have on their charts or what I've seen on charts. But, it just gets a little bit ridiculous trying to work out what's going on with a chart like this. A better way is to follow Gann's approach and have your multiple time frames lined up side by side. So how we do this in TradingView is we open a chart, then we go up the top. You'll see a little rectangle or square like that. Not sure if it's supposed to be a square or a rectangle, but you click on that and it gives you a series of options for how you want to set up your charts. So you might like to have 2 charts set up side by side. So you'll have this option here. Or you might like to have one horizontal at the top and one horizontal at the bottom. So you can have it set like that. I like to use either the 2 or the 3 like this vertically, or the 4 like this, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom, if I'm going to have multiple charts or wheels within wheels on the screen. Now, if you're not sure where to start out, start with 2. Don't come down here and try and do, say, 16 charts, and you won't be able to read them firstly because unless you've got a really large screen, but it's going to be too much noise on the chart. Start with something like this, a weekly chart and a daily chart side by side, and just observe how the weekly chart moves over time. TradingView has something called replay mode, by the way, where you can go back in time and then play the bars forward every few seconds as if it was in real time. So you can get a little bit of a feel for how that chart works, but get a feel for how one time frame works and then add a second time frame. You can go up the scale, up to your left, so weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, etc., or you can go down the time frames to the right, and you can go down to daily or 4 hour, 1 hour, etc. like that. If you want to change the time frames, you just click up here next to the name of the chart. There's a little time frame there. You can click on that or over here. So there's the weekly on the left and the daily on the right, and then you can just change the time frames there. Or you can click on this little icon up here and you can change the time frame there for whichever chart you have clicked on. This is an example of 3 charts side by side. This is actually, for most people, this is probably enough. If you're using Gann's planetary system, where you're getting 4 to 6 intermediate turns per month and then 1 to 3 of those larger turns per month, those larger turns for the most part are going to show up on your weekly chart, or many of them will show up on your weekly chart. Then you can track that medium cycle on your daily chart here as an example. And then you can use something like a 4-hour chart or a 1-hour chart over here. Look for things like a little first higher bottom here. See, there's a daily swing up there. This was the daily swing down. Look at the 4-hour chart. Ran down, lower top, run down, lower top, running down into that low there. big expanding range down there. You might not have been confident to buy there. Then the market just runs up a little bit, gives you a higher swing bottom on that smaller time frame, and that can be a potential place to enter as that new daily swing begins. Now, that's a really key thing there. Gann spoke about the safest place to enter being the first higher bottom for a long trade or the first lower top for a short trade. But learn to look at those key things there, just looking at your swings, running down, running up, running down, running up, running down, etc., and get comfortable looking at just 2 time frames first, so say a 4-hour and a daily, but then get comfortable looking at 3 swings at a time, and eventually you can get comfortable looking at, say, 4 or 5 or 6 time frames at a time, and that's plenty. But this is the concept of wheels within wheels, and this is how it works. When the extreme low comes in, the smaller time frames will turn first, and then the larger time frame will turn, and then the larger time frame will turn again after that. So the earlier that you see it, the earlier that you can get in and the higher your reward to risk ratio. Now, the challenge with the smaller timeframes is that they will give you more false signals. So again, you're not trying to make a decision based on just one time frame. You're looking to work out what's happening on multiple timeframes. So for example, you've got higher tops and higher bottoms on the weekly chart here. Here's the weekly chart coming into a higher bottom. Looks around a 50% retracement. I didn't actually test that one. I don't trade the SPY 200, but you might say, well, that could be a low on the weekly chart. Then you have a look on the daily chart. It's a little bit messy here, but you see, okay, on the 4-hour chart, a big run down, and then we've got a little higher bottom set up here. That might be worth a crack. And when something like this comes along, you can take a swing trade. You put an entry here, put your stop loss below the low. You let it unfold. 1, 2, 3, 4-hour bars later, the market's all the way up here. You can move your stop loss up to break even, and then the trade's not going to cost you anything if you're wrong. Now, I call that a smart trade. One of these days I will do a video series on that. But basically, a smart trade is when you get a small risk entry and you can move your stop to break even very quickly, add a few positions along the way without risking any money, and then bank the profit at the end. Now, if you've been following the Forex form guide videos, you'll know I tend to look at 4 charts. I have my monthly up the top, and then a weekly, and then down the bottom, a daily, and then a 4-hour. This is an example on the US dollar Japanese yen there. But again, get used to looking at your market on multiple time frames. Don't just try and work out, okay, here's a 4-hour chart that I'm going to trade off. I'll try and work out what the market's doing just off that. You can sometimes trade and survive just on one market, but Gann analysis is so much more powerful if you're doing it across multiple time frames and listening to what the market is telling you. Gann said, let the market tell its story. Let the market prove itself. Don't try and tell the market what it's going to do. Let the market tell you. So again, that's the reference from the Wall Street Stock Selector. It's just one page from several hundred pages in the 2 books, Truth of the Stock Tape and the Wall Street Stock Selector, but it is gold. It's the first piece of Gann gold that we're officially looking at in this series. If you want to delve into this a little bit more, I do highly recommend Safety in the Markets Active Trader Program, where they'll go into swing trading, form reading, and price forecasting using this wheels within wheels approach there. Now, if you want to use TradingView to set this up, that's the platform that I use for most of my analysis these days. You can go to TradingView.com. You can open a free TradingView account, and you can actually access all the Gann tools on there, I believe, at TradingView.com in the free version. Now, you can only open single screen charts if you're using the free version of TradingView. However, I believe you can have as many charts open as you like. So if you know your way around an internet browser and you can minimize some of them or shrink them down a little bit, you can actually sort of set that up by yourself if you open 3 or 4 up. But I'll leave that for you to play around with. If you do want to buy TradingView, I'll just give you a hint that they usually offer excellent Black Friday deals towards the end of November. So I'm recording this in August. A couple of months from now, you're going to get, it's something like 50 or 60% off depending on which package that you buy. Again, I'm not plugging TradingView. I don't get a kickback from that, but it's what I use in my trading. And if you do want to set your charts up this way, that is a way that you can do it. I know that you can do that on some of your broker platforms as well. Just check with your broking platform first to see if you can do that on your platform before you go out spending money on software. That's all for this video. In our next video coming up in this series, we're going to tackle the all-important concept of form reading. Now, this is one of the first things that you should be learning of Gann's, but before we get into form reading, I really want you to get comfortable with this wheels within wheels. And even if you don't do it for very long, spend some time looking at least 3 timeframes. Again, open up the weekly, daily, and 4-hour chart if you're interested in Gann's planetary system and get familiar with that because that's going to help you navigate most of the trades on that system. Once you're comfortable with the wheels within wheels, then you can start adding Gann's form reading techniques one at a time across all of your charts. So when you're learning something like resistance cards, for example, you will apply those to all of your charts rather than applying them to just one chart and trying to work out what's going on. That's all for part 2 of this series on WD Gann's gold. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you clicked like and left a comment on the video. The comment can just be thank you, it can be hello, it can be a question. I'm happy to answer questions to some extent. But if you do click like and leave a comment, it shows the YouTube algorithm that you're engaging with the video, and it's then likely to turn around and recommend that video to more people, and it just helps us to get Gann's message out to more people. In part 3, we're going to tackle the all-important form reading, and it does help if you have the wheels within wheels concept ingrained in your mind before you tackle form reading. Also, don't forget that you can join us at 7 p.m. every Sunday night when the Forex Form Guide launches. That's Sydney time, where we take a look at the major currency pairs through the lens of WD Gann analysis. That's all for this video. Until next time, all the best with your trading, and bye for now.